Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is an Educators in VR weekly workshop, and we're doing a very, very special event on XR safety for XR Safety Awareness Week. So come on in, find a nice comfy spot, and we're glad that you're here. Great job, Keely, on that beautiful world for your social event for students in VR. Fantastic work. That was awesome. Come on in, everyone. Find yourself a nice cozy place. Yeah, well, hopefully we can abuse that world some more. It was really spectacular.
Tomorrow, Keely.
Yay! Yay! Oh, so you're using the same world for tomorrow for students in VR? Awesome. All right. Okay.
I can't wait for the kitchen iteration.
Yay! Yeah, students in VR is going to be doing a cooking. Is it a cooking show or a cooking? What is it? Or is it students in VR virtual schooling?
We're doing it together, but but Keely's taking on lead on the kitchen one. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right, let's get started. I want to welcome all of you here to our weekly Educators in VR event. We are so thrilled you're here. We have an amazing panel that is here. We are filming it, and we are so excited about the topics here. But I want to give you a few updates on what is happening with Educators in VR is for the next week. Our virtual coaching and personal development session with Captain VR, Dana Maria, is tomorrow, like it is every Wednesday. And she has some really awesome guests lined up, but she's also doing some open discussions to help everyone. She's a therapist to help everyone deal with the stress that we've been going through lately. So check that out tomorrow here in AltSpace VR. We also have the World's Tour team if you are interested in the potential of using AltSpace for education and cultural stories and things. We're touring holiday worlds on Wednesday with the World Tours. So check that out. There's a Winter Wonderland Festival that is going on here in AltSpace, and they are all month long into January, and they are bringing tomorrow. They are bringing in Charlie Fink, who is one of the amazing experts and leaders. He's a columnist and an author on XR and VR technology. So Charlie Fink is going to be here for the Winter Wonderland. Please do not miss that. And Caitlin Krause, the author of Designing with Wonder, an amazing look at the design and experience in VR and in XR in general, the book. She's also working with the Virtual World Society. She is going to be at that Winter Wonderland event on Friday. We also have a variety of our Students in VR. We were just talking about that. Students in VR group, where the students lead and present the different events that we have here in AltSpace and Engage and all over the place. Their next event tomorrow is at a beautiful place that Keely, beautiful world that is designed on a snowflake and snow wonderful holiday experience. Students in VR is meeting tomorrow, so check that out. They're doing incredible work. These students are actually teaching teachers how to teach in VR. It is pretty amazing work. And then our ongoing holiday storytelling events that Educators in VR is sponsoring along with other groups here in AltSpace continue forward. And we have the reading of the Polar Express and The Grinch That Stole Christmas this weekend. And next week we have a very special reading, an excerpt of the some of the stories or some of the bits and pieces of A Christmas Story. That'll be here in AltSpace with Dr. Nancy Bixler, PhD, who is going to be sharing with us the parts of Dickens' view of the world.
Really, I think I just lost your audio.
I would love to fill in for Laurel, but I don't.
Okay. Sorry, we have a ton. Sorry about that. I have internet issues right now. We have a ton of events. You can learn more about those on our website at educatorsinvr.com and on our Discord. All the links are on the wall over there. All right. So now we are going to be doing this amazing presentation. Everybody, you can come on down. The bleachers don't bite, neither do we. Okay, sometimes. All right. We have an amazing presentation with some top scholars and trainers and experts, developers, world leaders really on XR safety, and especially focusing on medical, but it's across the board here with business in general. And this is so important to everything that we are, doing with developing, teaching, and convincing people that this is safe, but then how is it safe to use and work with? So I want to introduce you to Kavya Pearlman, who is known as Cyber Guardian. She's the founder and CEO of XRSI and the moderator of this event. She'll tell you more. Thank you so much for being here. It's all yours.
Thank you, Relay, and thank you for this remarkable, wonderful information that you just gave about educators in VR. We're really excited for this panel conducting with educators in VR on the XR Safety Awareness Week. So welcome everyone to the very first annual XR Safety Awareness Week. Today is the second day, which is focused mostly on medical XR, but in general, we'll be talking about safety awareness and digging deeper into the education aspects of it and what does that mean for the world of XR, specifically in the medical XR field. I'm Kavya Pearlman, as Relay told you. I'm the founder and CEO of XR Safety Initiative. It is a nonprofit dedicated to helping build safe virtual environments. We also focus a lot on inclusion, diversity, child safety, and of course, medical XR. So one of the programs at XRSI is Medical XR Advisory Council. The council was put in place just to address this gap that exists. Sometimes the people who are coming in from the gaming side to the medical XR side, and then from the XR domain to the medical domain, and there is a dire need for standards, regulations, standard guidelines, and that's where all of these experts that we have here, and a special guest, of course, from University of Michigan, Jeremy Nelson, who's not a part of the Medical XR Council, but has been a remarkable voice in putting together.
Kavya, you are not on air and no one can see or hear you in room 2. Could you make sure all the speakers have on air and megaphone on so that the people in room 2 can hear and see you? And could you repeat that introduction, please?
Okay, sure. Absolutely. And I believe you should be able to hear me now.
Yes.
Click the on air.
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm going to once again welcome everyone. And this is a panel about XR safety, specifically focused on medical XR. And today I have these esteemed panelists. Most of them are part of this Medical XR Council, a program that we have at XRSI. And instead of me talking, I actually just want to go one by one over to my panelists, starting with you, Rachel, and just give a brief introduction and what the Medical XR Council is all about and what we are here to talk about today.
Thank you, Kavya. I am honored to be here representing the council. We are a group, a small but mighty group of experts. We have experts in regulatory world. We have experts in education. We have academic researchers. We have practicing physicians. All of these people are passionate about XR, and they do cutting edge research, and they are obviously very concerned about us humans who use this technology, when we don't feel well or when the equipment is not functioning its best, as we can see sometimes right now. And it has to stay safe. It has to protect us. It has to make sure we don't get harmed. So I am very excited to be here, and especially it's very appropriate that we are helped by educators in VR, and we have these educators here today with us so that we can focus on the human aspect of it some more and say, how can we train the humans? What should we do in order to make this technology available to everyone and make it mainstream and make it safe enough to use like that?
Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. And I know Rachel is a huge accessibility advocate herself. In the previous panels I've discussed with you, You know, Rachel herself has a disability that, you know, I often hear her not talking about, but I encourage her because this is just such a strength too that makes her a huge accessibility advocate and yet be able to do all this amazing work that she's leading with. And over to you, Michelle. Please give a brief intro and tell us about yourself.
So hi, everybody. It's very exciting to be here. So I'm Michelle Abersold, and I'm a clinical professor at the University of Michigan School of Nursing. And a lot of the work that I do is really using different types of simulation methodologies, including XR, to help educate our future nurses. And I also do some collaborative work with other health professions, such as physicians, and just really excited, and you'll learn more about the work that I do. So, but just excited to be here and excited to be part of this medical XR advisory board and really looking at how we can make VR safe to use for our future healthcare providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Mind you, Michelle is one of those, when you say seasoned, I mean, she has been in the XR world from the very beginning, doing all sorts of stuff, which I had the privilege to learn as I was invited to University of Michigan to speak with, you know, their group, and I learned so much, and I highly recommend we follow Michelle if you're concerned about medical XR issues. So over to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Kavya. My name is Jeremy Nelson. I am the director of an extended reality initiative at the University of Michigan, where we are focused on bringing XR technologies for teaching and learning broadly to our 19 schools and colleges. And we've worked with faculty across our university. We have about 48,000 students at any given time that are on campus, normal times. And we also have a large online presence. We create a lot of open content that's deployed through Coursera and edX and FutureLearn to about 8 million learners globally that have taken our courses. And so we work, I've worked closely with Michelle, and we're working on some projects we'll talk about today. But prior to this, I spent the last 20 years in healthcare technology and healthcare management consulting. So I'm excited for the panel discussion today as the intersection of my career paths.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you especially for being here, taking time out of your busy schedule and helping us learn some of these things about safety and how the education is going to play a remarkable role into that. And of course, Richard, very glad for you to be here. You're dialing in from the UK. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Kavya, and thank you so much for inviting me today. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. As Kavya said, I work for an organisation called the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, which is part for an organisation called Health Education England. So we specifically look at how we train our future and existing workforce. So we're one of the largest employers in the world. So there's about 1.3 million people that we support, all the way through from undergraduate education through to when they retire. So it's a massive undertaking, and obviously with the pandemic this year, we've had to really adapt the way that we deliver education and training, so it's really pushed forward the agenda with the work we're doing with XR. So delighted to be invited today and to be able to talk about that.
Excellent. And there is a specific reason to have Richard here represent Health Education England and NHS. And if we could go to the second slide, here is the reason why I am really specifically excited for Richard to be here. So we are really glad to announce an official partnership between XRSI and Health Education England. And this will allow Health Education England to be a part of the Medical XR Advisory Council, and together with Michelle and other folks, and of course with Rachel and many other Medical XR Advisory Council members, we will exchange exchange information across the Atlantic and potentially be able to put standards, guidelines, regulations, and protocols in place and just learn from each other for the betterment and advancement of this particular domain. So really, really excited. In fact, I want to throw some hearts in there. And of course, you're encouraged to throw some hearts as well, because this is such a important partnership across the globe. And that's what makes our group really remarkable, that we are able to reach out, even though we are not able to travel, but our, reach is getting larger and larger across the globe in various countries. And thank you, Richard, for being here. And thank you for this partnership. There are several other colleagues of Richard that we have spoken with, and over the course of next year, we would be highlighting and featuring things that we learn from this group and things that we build together with the Medical XR Advisory Council. So right then I want to dive more into the gist of it. So let's start with you, Richard. I know that all of our guests are here passionate about education, healthcare professional, but let's explore this common theme starting with you. So what is healthcare education in England, and what are the three of its current priorities this year?
Sure, thank you, Kavya. So as I mentioned in my introduction, Health Education England is the national body in the UK that's responsible for education and training of that health and care workforce across the country. We're part of the National Health Service, so we're publicly funded. So obviously we need to make sure that everything we do gets the best return on an investment from the taxpayer. But equally, we want to make sure that we have the best workforce in the world. We want to make sure that they are highly trained and able to deliver the best possible patient care. So I think Health Education England is fairly unique around the globe. There aren't many countries that have an organisation that's specifically dedicated to coordinating the training activities of that healthcare workforce, particularly on the scale we do it. As I mentioned in my introduction, we've got about 1.3 million people that we support across the healthcare ecosystem, and that's all the way through from their undergraduate to when they retire. So I read somewhere, I think we're the third largest organisation in the world, so it's McDonald's and the Chinese railways are slightly bigger than us, but there's nobody that does the training that we do on the scale that we do, and that's pretty exciting, but also pretty intimidating, I guess, in terms of the scale of what we're trying to do. So I guess if you asked me those priorities a year ago, I'd probably have given you a very different answer. The global pandemic really meant that the majority of the work that we've been doing over the past 12 months has changed quite dramatically, and we've been supporting our amazing clinicians on the front line as they go through this incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging time. So just to give you some examples of that, we've had to build field hospitals. We've never had to do this before, so we're all learning on the job ourselves. So we've set up these vast field hospitals with thousands of beds. We've created brand new training programs to support people that are dealing with something they didn't even know about 12 months ago, and we've supported thousands of those retired clinicians that wanted to come and support and return them to practice to support the patients in the pandemic. I know this sounds like a really big cliche, but actually it's been a real privilege to work with just such incredible, passionate, enthusiastic people, and I've genuinely seen the best in humanity over the past year, and I think that's sort of a testament really to the people that go into health and care. It's just a real privilege to work with those people. So just thinking about those three main priorities that we've focused on the last year, really, it's been supporting that existing workforce to deliver the care for COVID-19 patients, upskilling them. So we've had non-specialists perhaps going into intensive care medicine where they haven't before. So maybe people working in maxillofacial or something like that, working in there, moving into emergency medicine. We've developed a platform called e-learning for healthcare, which has had more than 3 million people access to that course that we've put there specifically about coronavirus. So that was a huge undertaking itself. Second, I guess, was supporting people returning to practice. So I mentioned those people that are perhaps retired and want to come back in and support their colleagues on the front line. So we've been having to create clinical experiences for them and create simulated practice, as well as sort of delivering that education virtually through XR. And then I guess the thing that doesn't stop through a pandemic or through any other sort of major incident like this is increasing the capacity for providing those clinical placements for trainees that are coming into the workforce in perhaps a few years' time. So we've had to continue to train that next generation workforce despite all of those challenges with the pandemic and the fact that we perhaps didn't have some of the ability to provide those clinical placements that we had before.
Wonderful. What remarkable work, and absolutely couldn't agree with you more. All of our priorities have shifted, but at the same time, these new priorities really tell a story about humanity in general and how great people have been throughout this. You know, people have shown tremendous resilience, and that's the resilience of this global organization, is to step up to the task and provide what is really essential in this world at the moment that we are at. So thank you, Richard, for diving into those priorities. And I want to go over to Rachel with the same sort of notion. Is we just talked about priorities. And so what are the most prominent challenges that you're seeing, Rachel, that go beyond gaming in this space? And
Well,
if you could move to the next slide, Rel.
So safety is about us, the human beings that have to operate in any environment in this difficult year or another year where there's another challenge. And everything has to be, all the pieces have to fall into place for us to be able to use this new technology and be happy with it. So for instance, the notion of, let's say, usability, the way it combines into safety. Like if people start getting dizzy when they look into the glasses, into the goggles all day, or if the battery dies, or if you drop the thing on the floor and some harmful chemicals spill, you know, none of that is acceptable. So there are so many, or if your data falls in the wrong hands, that's not acceptable either. So I personally have trouble coming up with a priority list. To me, all of this is important, that it's overwhelming even. There's so many things. Interoperability. There's so much equipment, so much other equipment there in the hospital, making noises and requiring attention from the physicians and from the assistants, that all of that must fall into place, must interoperate, must play together nicely, and also accommodate the people. People make mistakes. People sometimes take shortcuts. All of that is safety, and I personally have trouble saying, what do we tackle first? So,
and if you could go to the next slide as Rachel's speaking, I know there is a few things that you've also talked about. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, interoperability is one of them, and there are so many things like that, And if we don't take technology into account and we just talk about disinfecting the equipment, something that does not maybe involve software or hardware, complex data processing, but is nevertheless very, very important and imperative for the safety of the healthcare providers and the patients alike. I'm sure my colleagues here will have a lot of examples of that because they are actually with the equipment in the hospitals and in the teaching institutions. So wonderful. There are many, many priorities, many concerns, and there have to be processes defined. There have to be protocols so that all of us can streamline our operations and know exactly what it is we have to implement in order to make this technology acceptable, larger scale.
And so thank you, Rachel, for that. And with that, I want to go over to Jeremy and talk about, you mentioned, you have such background in healthcare, and now you have stepped into this leading edge of medical XR as well as just in general XR. How did you start it? How your experiences informed, how to build or lead this field, Jeremy?
Sure. Yeah, it's been a journey. I've always enjoyed kind of that intersection of emerging technologies and kind of change management, or kind of people using technology, emerging technology in a new way, and kind of how do we help folks along that process? How do we create more content? How do we, bring it to scale? And so, I'm a computer engineer by training. I worked in the mental health field for a long time, helping organizations select and implement electronic medical records, so big organizational change. And this opportunity came up to help. I've always been interested in these types of immersive technologies, and this opportunity came up at the University of Michigan to kind of lead a program that's bringing together all the great work. Like you'd mentioned, Michelle's been doing work in the VR space for years, and before that, Second Life, and kind of all in this immersive space. And we had a number of faculty here at the university doing that, from medicine to nursing to architecture, information, dentistry. And so, but as you could imagine, at a large academic institution, folks get kind of busy in their own schools or in their own kind of departments. And I like to bring together community and collaboration and see opportunities for intersection and sharing. And so, one of my first tasks was just try to meet everybody and understand what we had going on, and then start to bring together groups to share their work. And we just participated in a couple of faculty lightning talks, just so folks could share what they were doing. And, a lot of this with emerging immersive technology, you really have to see it or try it on or just see what other people are doing to really get your creative energy going. And we've seen that really take hold and what folks want to do here so far.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy. And if we could go back to slide number 1 with all the headshots, that's where next one. There we go. Yeah, but we're pretty much, going to have most of our conversation, just more of a fireside chat type of conversation. But yeah, Michelle, I want to go over to you with this sort of same sense of, how has your past experience informed what's going on now? And, when did you personally become interested in that? I know that you've been around since like the Second Life era. So tell us more about yourself, your journey.
Yeah, so thank you. I have been doing a lot of work in all of the different types of virtual technologies. I have to say, growing up, I was, I guess what you would call a gamer, although the games weren't quite as cool as they are today. But I've always loved technology. I've always loved gaming. And when I got into academia, I was basically recruited to put together a simulation program. So if you think about like Rescue Annie, medical simulation, we use these computerized mannequins. And so I started working on that. And right around that time, I had heard about this thing called Second Life. And so, being somebody very interested in technology and trying to find ways to get education to our students beyond just having them come to campus or go to their clinical rotation. So I jumped into Second Life and dove all in, learned all about it, learned how to do some of the basic programming, learned all about the Linden dollars and the economy in Second Life. And so it was really quite a fascinating journey. And I'll have to say that many of those early experiences in using that Second Life virtual environment have really helped me think a lot about how to use the more immersive virtual technologies in working with our students and even with our nurses that are practicing at the bedside. So much of my focus is really, as I said, around healthcare education and using, and I'm someone who uses all different types of technologies, which makes me sort of one of those people that have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of the different technologies. Some I know better than others, but I like to, kind of get in and explore spaces and things like that. So what I find helpful and really relevant to nursing education is using many of the virtual programs that allow our students to basically go in and practice. So if anybody's sort of familiar with some of the data out there around, medical errors. So, we're very much on top of all of the different things going on with the pandemic and how many people have died from COVID. And I always find it a little bit sobering to think that as many people die in a year from medical errors as do from, what we're seeing with COVID. And so one of the things that I've always tried to focus on is how can we make our nurses better? How can we help them deliver the best possible care and avoid harming patients, not intentionally, but through some of the mistakes and things that occur. And one way we do that, much like airline pilots, is we practice, practice, practice. And we practice for what happens when, patients get really sick. So when we think about how quickly the COVID patients can deteriorate in the hospital and all of the respiratory complications, we can train for that. We can practice for that. And so I think that's the real advantage of the virtual technologies, is that we can do that, and our students can do that from home or from a lab or anywhere they can access this technology. And so I think it's a really great way to get that practicing in and help us just really be better, and then also refresh. So every year, many of us have to go through and, do our annual CPR training and things like that. So we've got that down. But what we've learned about COVID is personal protective equipment is so important. And what we know from some of the work that we've done in cancer safety, for nurses who deliver chemotherapy, they also have to use personal protective equipment. And much of the data shows that they're not as good as they think they are at putting it on and taking it off. And often they contaminate themselves. Either don't put it on right, or they contaminate themselves taking it off. So we're actually collaborating with Jeremy to put together a VR training environment. And it could be done like in a Go or a Quest, where our practicing nurses who care for our cancer patients can really practice how to manage emergencies that don't happen often, but when they do, they can have devastating effects. And then one of the things that we've included in there is the steps for them to put on and take off their PPE. So it's just a really amazing time to be part of this world. And I know that in medical education, just as Richard talked about, is right now using virtual education methods, whether it's immersive like this or if it's just a screen-based virtual environment, have been hugely transformative in helping our frontline providers get the education that they need when we can't always bring them into the sites where we might normally train them. So yeah, it's a great time to be in VR.
I totally agree. And what a remarkable journey. I seriously applaud you for all that, and the persistence. And many times, just seeing all these titles, it seems like, wow, that's awesome. But, there is years and years of relentless hard work that goes into it, and the audacity to try these new fields, because we know that education, academia sometimes can move slow, but we don't have the luxury of moving slow anymore, since the Silicon Valley folks are moving pretty fast. And with the same notion, Richard, I want to ask you then, when was it, how and when did you personally become interested in this immersive technology, and what kind of impact has it had on you as a person?
So I guess in my current job, I'm very much like Michelle was describing. I suppose we get to experiment with a lot of the different technologies. So we have a sort of working knowledge of a lot of different technologies, of which VR, augmented reality, XR is part of that. And I'm really privileged in my job to be able to work with all those emerging technologies and explore how we can apply them in an education and training context. Ultimately, this is all about patient care, though. So it's about improving those educational outcomes, improving the clinicians that we work with, and making the patient care better. And XR is one of the technologies that allows us to do that. So typically, at the moment, we have many very expensive simulators. Some of these simulators, just to give you an idea of the cost, they're incredible. These physical mannequins that you can have a group of people around doing an intervention on. They're incredible devices, but they'll cost more than your car, or some of them cost more than your house probably costs. So they're really not very accessible. So the VR headsets, the XR headsets like the HoloLens and things, give us that ability to really sort of make it available to a mass audience and improve the equity of access. And I think that's what really excites me about this. On a sort of personal level, I've always been excited by technology. I'm a self-confessed geek. I don't mind admitting that. And I have often been an early adopter of a lot of these tools and technologies. And to be honest, I'd forgotten about Second Life until Michelle started talking about it. But yeah, that was one of the ones we experimented with it about 10 years ago, probably now. So these technologies have been on my radar for some time. So when the opportunity came up to start exploring them professionally, I obviously jumped at that opportunity and saw what we could do. But they really have just transformed and revolutionised the way that we're delivering training, and I think it's the human aspect I'm really interested in. The technology's great, but actually, if we can make better clinicians and we can make better patient care, then that's what this is all about, and that's what really excites me.
Wonderful. So well said. We absolutely need to focus on those aspects. And in fact, now it's, after just hearing from you one by one, it makes me think we have three experts on the education. We are at this, education in VR panel, and we're talking about safety, and we're celebrating this XR Safety Awareness Week. What a wonderful moment, I must say. And so let's focus on this aspect of education. Let me go to then Jeremy. Why do you believe it's important to develop this technology, and what obstacles do you see, like financially, safety, security, ethics-wise?
How much time do we have? Yeah, I mean, I think it's, we're often looking at ways to innovate in delivering higher education, bending that cost curve a little bit. That's the group I'm in, the Center for Academic Innovation. We've created a lot of open content, made it available to people globally. And I think, while that's great with videos and kind of interactive quizzes and things, I think this is kind of that next level of bringing like we are today. Like, it feels a lot better than staring at a Zoom or a Teams meeting, and being able to interact in a new way. I mean, there are serious limitations with access to the equipment and devices and internet connectivity, and those are real challenges. I think from a a safety standpoint, I'm very interested in trying to get ahead of what happened with all the social media and privacy and access to data. And we're collaborating with a number of other institutions about what it means with the new Quest 2 and the Facebook account. And we're under federal regulations to protect student data in terms of for educational content. And I was having a conversation recently with our chief information security officer and kind of explaining the situation and what you can do with this data and the amount of data and the issue with the new Facebook logins. And he was like, "You deploy those and I will come confiscate them all. We cannot force students to do that." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to, but I just wanted to raise the issue." And so a number of other institutions, we've put together a letter to send out to Facebook and trying to work on a solution of a, kind of an Oculus for education that's similar to the Oculus for business, but in a more affordable price range. And so we've gotten a response. We had about 40 institutions sign up. They said they know it's an issue. They want to work with us on something. So that's encouraging. I don't hold out, that we're going to get there quickly, but, it's a positive sign. Otherwise we have to move to other platforms and other devices that, cost more money and kind of put that burden back on. But it is very important to us that, the students, have control or understanding about what's happening with their data and, how these experiences could, impact kind of their future.
Exactly. And so I'm really thrilled to be collaborating with the University of Michigan's, Center of Academic Innovation, and with Jeremy Nelson's, couple of other colleagues, heavily worked on what we call it the very first privacy framework for XR, and heavily contributed to the education side of it, or, higher ed. What does it mean for higher ed? And then taking it to the next level to even reach out to Facebook and, even some of the conversation at the congressional level. So really, Jeremy, I have to say you're playing such a remarkable, significant role in this domain for the industry. And thank you so much for that. And we're talking about, University of Michigan, all the stuff that's going on there. Michelle, I want to look to you. So what are the VR projects that you're currently working on, and what concerns do you have implementing these in other similar use cases?
So, I think Jeremy really talked about it well in terms of, this whole idea of trying to come up with a way for our students to log in without having to, use Facebook accounts. Prior to that, we were able to sort of develop a kind of a common login, much like we do with our other simulators. But the projects that I'm working on right now, one of them, and I mentioned that this is a collaboration with Jeremy from XR, is we have got a grant from the National Cancer Institute a few years ago to look at improving the nurses and pharmacists' safe delivery of chemotherapy to patients. And so this is really sort of a twofold approach. One, it's to improve patient care and how well we manage chemotherapy emergencies. And the other is to really improve nurses and pharmacists' ability to deliver these drugs safely. So if you know anything about chemotherapy, the drug itself is really much like a poison because it kills cancer cells. And the challenge is if you are someone who is handling, so think about sort of handling hazardous materials, that's really what nurses and pharmacists are doing when they deliver chemotherapy. So there are a lot of things involved in safe practice that are important. And so we were doing a lot of in-person simulation and didactic work. And then COVID hit. We had always planned on doing some digital resources for our participants to be able to practice with on their own. But I think kind of COVID sort of accelerated the timeline for that. And so we had to move our whole education virtually. And so we're doing virtual simulations, but then one of the things that we'll be able to offer our upcoming group of participants is this VR experience, this way that we can get our students and our participants a little bit more opportunity to practice what they're learning in VR. And VR is such a rich environment. And again, as you know, from being in the environment, just even being up here, as Jeremy was saying, talking and feeling like, oh, I can use my hands and you can see my hands moving and this is great. So, I feel like I'm sort of creating this, as we say in professional training, this kind of muscle memory and that. And so we're hoping that creating these virtual assets and these programs for our nurses and pharmacists to go in and do and actually kind of go through and go through this sort of unfolding case study, but not on paper, but really in virtual reality. And then to create something that is able to be used on a simple device like an Oculus Go, or maybe we even have to do a desktop version, until more and more people have access to headsets and things like that. So I think that's just a really cool thing. Another program that I'm working on, and this is one that really has brought to life some of the challenges that I know I'm sure Richard and his colleagues have faced. And this is an actual training application for nurses and physicians who are part of the code team in a hospital. And my physician colleague who's lead on this has really done an amazing job at sort of dealing with all of the things that are in a hospital environment, from HIPAA, privacy and firewall issues and all of that, for us to be able to even pilot test our program. So the program's not developed yet, but we're trying to, work with IT and work on many of these issues right up front. And a couple of things that really are going to be things that we have to be mindful of is, one, the data. So when you're dealing with nurses and physicians who are actively practicing and doing patient care and being part of this code team response, and now we're putting them in training, and we have all this data that's being collected on them, and we have to protect them. We have to protect that data, much like we do in an education system, so that other people don't have access to that, and to provide them with a sense of confidentiality, much like we do with our mannequin simulations. And so again, it's a really great program, but we're really learning a lot about our IT interface and whether or not people can even have headsets and head-mounted displays in patient care areas. Although again, here's where and I hate to say this again, but here's where COVID has actually helped, and some of the work that's been done over in the UK with using like a HoloLens to be able to actually virtually round on patients, and telehealth and all of that is just growing by leaps and bounds. So I think when Kavya says, it's like, how do they say, the horse is out of the barn or out of the gate or whatever, it's like, I think that things are all of a sudden taking off, and we're kind of running to keep up and make sure that all those privacy things. And then you have the whole issue around cleaning devices. So, we never really thought about that until, we're all running around with masks and hand sanitizers and things like that. And it's like, wow, not only do we have to worry about safety and, people getting nauseous or tripping over something, but now we also have to worry about how clean are our devices and not passing COVID around. So, just so many things to think about. But again, it's so great to see the work that Kavya and her group are doing in this area, and the work that Jeremy's able to do in helping sort of provide some leadership at the university in this area.
Yeah.
So,
and thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Michelle. And that's the thing, is the sentence that you were looking for is the genie is out of the bottle. And we can't put this back in, and we can't go back to the way things used to be. But what we can do is we can innovate with responsible, ethical, and more of a very pragmatic measurement. And along the same lines, because you just said there is so much to do, I want to ask Richard, what are the priorities in terms of immersive tech, and where is it, this list of priorities that you earlier mentioned, where does that fit in terms of education or HEE?
Thanks, Kavya. Yeah, I think Michelle summed it up pretty well, actually. The horse is bolted from the stable, or whatever phrase we're going to use tonight. But I guess the silver lining for the pandemic, as horrible as it's been for both the people, obviously the families and the people that have been most affected by it, and obviously all the clinicians that have been supporting this. But actually, this has really brought focus and attention on the work that we've been doing with education technology. So whether that's sort of simple stuff like virtual classrooms and things like that, all the way through to the high-end devices like the HoloLens and things, it's really brought focus onto that. And obviously with the focus comes money as well. So there's now not just the serious attention, but serious investment into this as well. So to give you some examples, we've looked at using the HoloLens 2 for virtual ward rounds. So using the front-facing camera to be able to do that, to bring up X-rays and other sort of clinical information on the screen. You get an experienced clinician to wear the headset, and they can broadcast their patient interaction back to a group of trainees remotely. We've also got some fantastic examples of where we've used HoloLens for anatomy teaching and wound care, for example. So we've got a care home that we're working with where the HoloLens can be used to overlay wounds on a healthy arm, and we can see what's going on underneath the skin essentially. And that's a really powerful training device, far more suitable than perhaps a picture in a textbook or something like that. So there's some really nice examples of where that's happening. And I suppose just reflecting on that, perhaps for the first time in healthcare, we're developing a blended nursing undergraduate degree with a number of our academic partners in the UK, and the regulators that are supporting this, looking at as much as 50% of that training being delivered through simulation. So traditionally that would be through cadaveric dissection or through these really expensive mannequins I talked about earlier. But actually now we've got some really sophisticated devices in the Oculus Quest 2, we've got the HoloLens 2, we've got other devices that are coming onto the market very soon. We've got these incredible tools that all of these devices support, the software and things like that we can use some really sophisticated simulation through these devices. And that's really quite exciting in terms of what we can do. So like I say, the cat is out of the bag, to paraphrase Michelle. There's no going back now. I really do see this being adopted very widely, and we're investing a lot of money in this across the healthcare system in the UK.
That is good to hear. Yeah, all of our priorities have changed, and World of XR is offering us this amazing new avenue. And so it's good to hear the priorities like safety and education are on the top of you guys' mind. And of course, it remains a priority for us as always. Jeremy, I want to ask you, Richard just mentioned something about the HoloLens research. I know you guys are working on some HoloLens 2 research. So I wonder what kind of issues that you are encountering during this research, and anything that you want to highlight for our audience.
Sure. No, we've actually we're taking a cue from your colleagues over at Imperial College in London, and we've been collaborating with them around the virtual ward rounds. So one of the challenges is med students and nursing students aren't able to get their number of rounds where they go into the patient room. They're not able to get the same number of sessions and hours, and so we've been collaborating with them to try to replicate where they send either a student or a physician in with the HoloLens. And kind of the rest of the team can join a Teams meeting to participate. So and kind of see from the perspective and point of view, and then the person wearing the headset can kind of see holographic windows of the medical record or chart and the other people involved. So it's pretty powerful. We've actually done a couple pilot tests here successfully in this last week. And just some of the big challenges really were around the technical hurdles of our IT infrastructure and the security. And, we didn't have an Office 365 environment set up. And so how do we use the HIPAA compliant versions of Zoom and kind of make it work? So we've made it work. It's not quite. We've had to get a little MacGyver hacking around to make it to work right now. But I think the opportunities it will offer for continuing ed or even just kind of remote expert consult are pretty exciting. There's other folks exploring where this technology, like there was somebody in our kinesiology department interested in exploring concussions. And could they use the eye tracking on the HoloLens to more objectively evaluate concussions for athletes or patients? And so while that's really interesting and exciting, kind of the level of accuracy of the eye tracking in the headset might not quite be there yet. Microsoft obviously doesn't condone that for full medical use. So I think we're reaching some of those boundaries and kind of where it is today. But the HoloLens 2 compared to the HoloLens 1 is a huge leap forward in terms of technological advances, hand interactions, gestures, just comfort itself, flexibility. It's been very powerful.
Good to know. Very good. And these are some amazing projects that are being worked on. We are really grateful that you're giving that inside knowledge to us and all the things that are being worked on in the behind the scenes. We're getting pretty close to the hour. The one last question I want to ask before I go to the closing question is from Richard. So Richard, where do you see HEE and XRSI collaboration making the biggest impact? And Richard, you might be muted.
Wow, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. That's the phrase of 2020, isn't it? Apologies. So we have so much to learn about the technologies. We're just scraping the surface, really, of what the capabilities are of these things. We've got so much to learn from all the amazing people that are in this room today, and all of the lovely audience, and I'm sure who have way more experience than I do on this. I know my colleague Nick is in the audience, so shout out to him. He's done some incredible stuff with virtual reality filming and 360 filming, and we really are just scraping the surface of what the capabilities are of this. So I really see this being a collaboration so that we can learn from peers around the world who are way more experienced in implementing this technology than we are, and also hopefully we can share some of our collaboration as well and our industry work. I think there's a lot to learn from other sectors as well. We're in our healthcare bubble, and I think we've got a lot to learn from like the gaming industry in particular, because they've been pioneers in this space for a long time. if you think about sort of Grand Theft Auto and all those sort of first player games, actually they were sort of the first foray really into virtual reality almost. So we can start implementing those really realistic XR experiences with future doctors and future nurses